Hold up, I ain't trying to stunt, man, but the Yeezys jumped over the jump, man. I be in and out of arenas like I'm Scottie Pippen.
Left my elbow in the pot, a la Vince Carter.
Bitch, you weren't with me shooting in the gym?
James Harden with the range on me, nigga, way back.
Coach, they won't knock me off my pivot, forget it.
Been flowing stupid since Vince Carter was on some through the legs arm and a hoop shit.
And you can live through anything if magic made it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, now you do.
Yes, sir. We are back. Round of applause for yourselves. We got a few things on the docket for today. Embiid is not helping out the league, just trying to avoid this whole load management culture. What's going on? Is he avoiding the smoke against Jokic in Denver? Also, we'll touch base on KD making comments about him not being in the GOAT conversation. We'll break this down layer by layer, as him being tied to that conversation has a lot to do with the storylines of LeBron James and Stephen Curry. And finally, we'll touch base on a few multi-layered things that are going on in Milwaukee. From new ownership coming in, trying to maintain evaluations, from Giannis making franchise decisions, and Damian Lillard coming in and kind of changing their style of play, as right now they're pretty much playing Atlanta Hawks / Pacer basketball, where it's pretty much, I'm just going to outscore you. With Doc Rivers as head coach, could the necessary changes really be made? Now, the NBA in the start of the season had begun to shift itself away from this load management culture that's kind of taken the league by storm. And it's even gotten so bad to the point where even younger players who just got into the league are asking for their load management days. And at the same time, the NBA is in the midst of their TV negotiation deals. They're trying to market their television product to their TV partners to leverage themselves to get almost double the asking price of their previous deals. And with that, stars have to play. But during the first implementation this season, we've seen a few hiccups when James Harden was benched with the 76ers earlier in the season, and the league pretty much had to step in and put an end to that, and that's how he got traded to the Clippers. Remember, that game was a televised TNT game in which it had ESPN writing articles of why superstars were not playing for a TNT game. So the television partners were aligned, and they were making sure that stars were playing for the marquee matchups that they paid for. So there is pressure for the league to get rid of this load management, and Joel Embiid in his most recent matchup with Jokic, going out there in Denver, playing in that altitude, him being out was overall not a good look. First of all, the 76ers were on a short week. They had 3 games. They played Monday, Thursday, and that Saturday. And not only this was a televised game, this was Rivals Week. Not only for Joel to be out, but in the manner that it happened. He was never on the injury report list. Tyrese Maxey was already questionable. Tobias Harris was going through an illness. It's that time of the year. Guys get sick. There's small little cold viruses going around. Guys are traveling through airports. That's understandable. Milton was already out for the 76ers. So Joel Embiid, seeing all these guys being out for this game, it looks like he just called out of it. So as soon as tip-off was about to begin, Joel Embiid was scratched out of the lineup. And some would say, yeah, he's ducking smoke from Jokic, but I don't think it's that. Embiid this season, let's be honest, he's been dragging his feet to complete these 65 games. There was a nationally televised game against the Knicks, and his effort was completely lackluster, and it was obvious that he was trying to hit that 65 game mark, as that effort was completely lackluster and he was pretty much just stat padding. It wouldn't shock me if the league tried to market this in a way where it's really about the fans. They paid their hard-earned money to come see Embiid and he didn't play, but it's not really about that. From them implementing the 65 game rule change to them even making announcements that they're moving away from the load management culture where the science does not prove it. All of this happened to come down the line when they're about to sit down with their TV partners and renegotiate their TV deals. And I'm surprised also with this Embiid situation where the league is obviously in bed with the gambling companies. For Embiid to just be scratched off the book like this, I'm wondering how much an effect did it cause to some of these sports books. Because best believe the 76ers are facing fines because of this. But this rest culture that has infested the league, where guys are sitting out even though they're healthy enough to play, It is a branding that the league has on it that they do not want. And superstar soccer player Kylian Mbappé even emphasized that even his sport is heading towards the NBA route, where guys are going to have to take rest days due to the grueling schedule that they are now forced to be in due to the promotional aspect of the game globally. Soccer slowly over the years have moved into almost a NBA 63 games to 70 game business model, and players are now beginning to rest certain nights off, even though fans do pay a lot of money. Since the game is global, once in a lifetime chance certain fans get to see these players, but they're more than likely going to begin to start sitting out these games. And Mbappe's comments are pretty much confirmation of the branding that the NBA does have on it as being a league where guys tend to rest even though they're healthy enough to play. Let's take a look at what the international soccer star had to say.
We're getting closer to the NBA model with seasons of 70 games. Personally, I'm not against playing that many matches, but we won't be able to be good every time and give the public the spectacle they expect. In the NBA, players don't play every game and franchises practice load management. But if I said I'm tired, I'm not playing on Saturday, it wouldn't go down well. The spectator who pays for his ticket and who may only see you once during the season wants to see a performance worthy of the name, and that's understandable. I don't want to preach, but we need to think together about how to offer the best possible solution so that players, spectators, and soccer's governing bodies can all embrace it.
So right there, Mbappe acknowledges the quality of play will disintegrate. And that's something that the NBA has always been accused of. Guys taking nights off even though they're playing. They're just pretty much stat padding, especially when they have travel back-to-backs. But unlike the NBA, soccer does not have that load management culture. Like he said, if he took off a game, it would not go down well. But in the NBA, that type of culture has been normalized in the last few years. And when it comes to Joel Embiid, the optics just don't look good here. With the last minute scratch, him not even being on the injury report, it just left little wiggle room for Joel to kind of escape this backlash. But hey, it's justified. Once again, the NBA is in negotiations right now. That's why we've seen the creation of the in-season tournament, the play-in. All these brand new concepts were virtually made to create brand new inventory to provide to TV partners. All these tournaments and concepts were made in order to create brand new pieces of inventory to approach their TV partners at the negotiation table, including that rest policy rule. But hey, when you have international soccer stars referring to your league for load management culture to justify resting, you got one hell of a rebrand shift to make. So when it comes to Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Stephen Curry, when everything is all said and done, you cannot speak on each player's legacy without speaking about the other. For one, when LeBron James had returned to Cleveland in 2014, he was pretty much on his way of just collecting championships, possibly 3 to 4 of them. But a young Stephen Curry, along with his teammates Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and Andre Iguodala, along with a little bit of luck, got one over on LeBron James. But in the following season, LeBron James and Kyrie Irving were able to put together a great comeback on the Golden State Warriors, even though Las Vegas had them as the favorites in that series. But after that exact moment, if the script was to continue the way it should have been written, LeBron James was basically going to have won over the Warriors every single season after that. The Warriors at that point were similar to the Seattle Seahawks and the Legion of Boom after Russell Wilson threw that interception in the Super Bowl. After that, that team was pretty much done due to that devastating loss. And it was a similar circumstance with the Golden State Warriors blowing that 3-1 lead, Draymond getting suspended, and Andrew Bogut getting hurt in the finals. But what brought Golden State back to life was Kevin Durant joining them the following season. And thus the script changed. LeBron James, instead of adding more rings to his legacy, his path took a left turn, and unexpectedly Kevin Durant cemented himself with a couple of rings. But eventually, due to a lot of outside pressure, Durant of course left Golden State, went on his own to fully solidify himself, almost taking the same journey LeBron James did when he left Miami and went to Cleveland. He had to get one on his own to fully cement his legacy. But here's where the legacy of Steph Curry comes in. Stephen Curry, at the time when KD had departed from the Warriors, he's always left curiosity among NBA viewers, whether it be beat writers, analysts, fans, but we always had this notion in our heads: could Curry do it on his own? We've never fully seen it, and the narrative of him in 2015 winning the finals and not even getting the finals MVP was pretty much the overall narrative hanging over his head, and he needed to jump over that hurdle to cement himself and his legacy. And we could tell at the time it meant a lot to him, because in the 2017 NBA Finals, after being up 3-1, he went to the locker room crying because he understood that he had not performed well enough in that game to solidify himself as a finals MVP, and KD would basically take it back to back. But here's where things get real interesting. Starting off in the 2020-21 season, Stephen Curry looked revamped. The Warriors were going through injuries, but he was clearly the leader, and he began to close that narrative of could he be that guy to lead his team. And then finally, he cemented his legacy not only with a great season in 2021-22, but also an NBA championship, undoubtedly leading his team. And he did this with Andrew Wiggins as his second best player at the time, as Klay Thompson returned, but he wasn't his old self. But Stephen Curry still elevated himself to a whole nother level that we've never seen before. Not only did he bulk up and revamp his whole physical body, but he also added a few layers to his game. But after that championship, a brand new pressure started happening on Kevin Durant's side. It was proven that Stephen Curry could win a ring without KD. Now the pressure was on for KD to do the same. That's why I said in the beginning of this segment, you cannot tell one player's story without mentioning the other. These three players deeply impact each other's legacies. But Kevin Durant recently was asked, when GOAT conversations are had, how come he's never mentioned? And his reply was quite interesting.
Because I went to the Warriors? Durant said, why shouldn't I be in that? That's the question you should ask. Why not? What haven't I done?
Now I agree with him in that first part. He should be at least considered, because in reality, he's not really considered like that. But what hasn't he done? He has not responded to what Stephen Curry did in 2022 by not only leading his team during the regular season, but winning an NBA Finals without him. That's why that championship by Stephen Curry was very important. It solidified his legacy, the same way Kobe Bryant won that championship in 2010, defeating the Boston Celtics. It solidified him. Not all championships are created equal. And you could also say the same thing about LeBron James in 2016, when he returned that championship back to Cleveland. It cemented his legacy. Kevin Durant still needs that moment. At first, when he left the Warriors, he didn't really need that moment. But when Stephen Curry led his team to a championship in 2022, the pressure was on. But another layer to this whole Stephen Curry, KD, LeBron saga is the revisionist history some of us had about LeBron James going to Miami. Him and KD kind of did the same thing. Make no mistake about it, D Wade and Chris Bosh were considered top 10 players before LeBron James had went to Miami. And there is no doubt, pound for pound, talent for talent, that having D Wade and Chris Bosh as your teammates along with LeBron James is not even nowhere near close to having Draymond Green and Klay Thompson. That is not even close, especially when you factor in LeBron James, which is pound for pound still a greater talent than Stephen Curry. But the system that the Warriors play was by far revolutionary. It changed the game. And this is where Stephen Curry's career still impacts LeBron James outside of KD's decision going to the Golden State Warriors. Stephen Curry in LeBron's era, or should I say LeBron's reign as the king of the NBA, his impact on the league is 10 times more than LeBron James. He's actually changed the game, the kind of shots you're allowed to take. You see kids playing the same way Stephen Curry plays, taking three-point shots that before would be considered horrible shots. But now, because of the play, Stephen Curry is considered okay. He's really impacted the game in a way that people did not see happening, especially during LeBron James' reign. But going back to LeBron James joining the Heat, which is a very similar situation to when KD joined the Warriors. Let's not forget, The Miami Heat not only had D Wade and Bosh, they also were able to recruit Ray Allen to that team. And from season to season, with the genius Pat Riley up in the front office, they were able to get three-point shooters to surround LeBron James. Mike Miller, Shane Battier, Rashard Lewis. Rashard Lewis was an all-star in Seattle by himself. So KD's decision to go to Golden State, it looks different when you begin to put things into proper context. The Golden State Warriors drafted all their guys. Draymond Green was a second-round pick that fit well into their system, but he wasn't a guy that was hopping out the gym and just having a bunch of raw talent or being this superstar that puts up crazy numbers. He fit into their system well. He played excellent all-NBA defense. He sort of has like a Dennis Rodman impact on the Chicago Bulls. But this notion of Kevin Durant joining a all-star team is slightly overrated. It's slightly overrated, especially when you compare to LeBron's decision of him joining up with D Wade and Chris Bosh. And then Haslam, a guy who was a double-double machine at the time, took a complete pay cut in order for these three guys to re-sign with the Heat. So low-key, they had a player that pretty much qualified, I don't want to say for max money, but for a large contract, and he was taking almost a vet minimum. That's why they hung up his jersey in Miami and he stayed on the team throughout the years. They basically was paying him back his salary that he took a pay cut on. But once again, when you review things into proper context, when you take a look back at KD's decision of joining the Warriors, I think it's a bit overblown that they were an all-star team. They drafted all their guys. They happened to win 73 games because of the system that they were playing. But with that devastating loss that they had in the finals, Kevin Durant was pretty much a lifeline of them continuing that kind of stretch run that they had during that 73-game win season. That style of play, Kevin Durant joining their team basically extended that. Because from season to season after that, teams were kind of catching up to what the Warriors were doing. Once again, that's why you can't really tell the Stephen Curry story without KD. 2 of those rings was because of Kevin Durant. But as soon as KD left, you began to see that system that they ran was starting to crumble. Other teams were beginning to catch up to it. But again, looking at LeBron throughout his career, if we're going to discredit KD for joining the Warriors, then we're going to have to hold LeBron to the same standard for his 2 Heat championships. The only reason LeBron has a heads up on KD and people don't really hold it over his head that he went to Miami is because he brought a championship to Cleveland. That's where KD has to bounce back. He's going to have to win one on his own. But make no mistake about it, LeBron James throughout his whole career has pretty much played with a lot of first ballot Hall of Famers. D Wade and Chris Bosh already got in first time they were eligible. And if you look at when he joined Cleveland, Kevin Love will fall in the same route. And Kyrie Irving possibly too, depending on how his last few years come about. But no doubt he's making the Hall of Fame for sure. I'm not sure if it's going to be first ballot. But LeBron James throughout his career has played with a lot of Hall of Famers, even on the Lakers. Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, Rajon Rondo, Russell Westbrook, Marc Gasol, Carmelo Anthony. The list goes on and on. LeBron James throughout his whole career, man, he's played with a lot of talent, especially for a player that has only 4 rings. And just like in Miami, he's had a ton of, I don't want to say completely role players, but just players who could service him and AD as a duo out there in LA. Yeah, Isaiah Thomas, former point guard of the Celtics, D'Angelo Russell, Pat Bev, Andre Drummond. They even tried to get Kawhi out in LA the year after the Raptors won the championship in 2019. Remember, the Lakers were in the sweepstakes for that. But had the Lakers got Kawhi, you have to ask yourself, in the GOAT conversations, will we have the same energy for LeBron as we would for KD? And more than likely, the answer would be no, because once again, KD has to do it out on his own. The pressure is on. He can't really rely on saying, oh, I won a championship in Golden State. They've never done it without me. Because after 2022, that no longer has been the case. So when you take a step back and put things into proper context, these players' legacies are more intertwined and the situation is kind of a bit more layered than what it appears to be. But make no mistake about it, Kevin Durant has the most pressure to bring home an NBA title without Stephen Curry. You know, the Milwaukee Bucks this season, they kind of reflect the landscape of the NBA overall. And I'm talking about things outside of the court. With the evolving media landscape, the influx of brand new owners kind of buying these teams at inflated evaluations, all these things kind of play out, and things can go positive or they can go left real fast. And with the Milwaukee Bucks this season, we're seeing the kind of evolution of having your franchise player kind of run things. And it's a question a lot of fan bases have to ask themselves. Is your star player running your franchise? Because when it comes to the Milwaukee Bucks, during this past offseason, they were asked over and over, is Giannis going to re-sign? Is he going to re-sign? And later on, come to find out, their former owner was kind of pressed to see if he was going to re-sign because he had plans on selling the team and profiting from these sort of inflated prices a lot of these NBA teams are at right now. And ever since the Phoenix Suns were purchased for an inflated price, it started creating a trickle-down effect where owners kind of felt pressured after they purchased these teams to keep up the evaluations. As we see the Suns, they went after Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant. And it's playing out no different in Milwaukee. New ownership came in, they wanted to lock down Giannis, and they compromised themselves a little bit. First of all, they hired a first-year head coach, and they made the full commitment of acquiring Damian Lillard, which is basically going to put this team into luxury tax hell for the next couple of years. Now, apparently the Bucks were looking at different head coaches, and Giannis gave the okay to a first-year head coach in Adrian Griffin over other experienced coaches. And with the mounting pressure to keep players happy, along with going after a championship in the narrow window that they have, especially for a team that doesn't have a lot of draft picks, they have 2 max players on the roster. And with the new CBA up and coming, it's going to get harder and harder for teams that take up this much cap space to actually have the flexibility to improve their roster from year in, year out. And things started off rocky for the Bucks because Terry Stotts, the former coach of Damian Lillard when he was out in Portland, kind of had a back and forth with Adrian Griffin earlier in preseason, and he had unfortunately resigned. Now, for those of you who worked in corporate America, you'd be familiar with this move. The fact that the Bucks hired Doc Rivers as a consultant in December, the fix was already in. And Adrian Griffin having a great record, 30-13, it didn't really mean as much. The fit of Dame and Giannis is still kind of not as in sync as it should be. The transition defense is horrible. The defense period is horrible. But that's no surprise, especially when you get a guy like Dame and you have a guy like Malik Beasley in the backcourt. What do you expect? So the Bucks basically found themselves playing in the I'ma outscore you scenario, same way the Pacers and the Hawks play. And for a championship-bound team, that shit does not work. And you could tell Adrian Griffin was not Milwaukee's choice. The fact that they bought Doc Rivers out of his ESPN contract and then paid him a hefty fee to come work for them. It shows you that they were compromised at a point during the offseason. I would say right before the season started, around that time they acquired Dame and before Giannis re-signed. They were a bit compromised and they were trying to please Giannis. But the pressure for them to keep up the evaluations is real. And when it comes to Giannis, he's going to have to let Dame know that Dame time shit that he was doing out in Portland is not going to work in Milwaukee, especially if they want to make a trip to the finals or even win the finals. The Bucks this year so far, even entering January, are ranked 28th in team defense. Just that transition defense overall is horrible. I mean, when the Bucks score a basket, instantly the other team scores another basket within 8 seconds. And then some pieces of their roster is so clunky. Beasley and Middleton do not get any offensive boards. And best believe that does reflect on the defensive end too. They don't rebound. Middleton throughout the years has shown aging, and of course his injuries are catching up to him. But believe it or not, Dame at some point is going to start showing the same thing, minus the injuries hopefully. But sometimes superstars players, they don't realize that when they get into this whole I'm gonna build my fantasy team bag that they love to get into, getting guys like Dame, Giannis put himself in a position where he's actually doing more work. He has to have game nights where he's shooting 70% and the team is still giving up 100 points, which is very reminiscent to Dame time in Portland. Dame would have these games where he's dropping 45, 50 points, but yet he has to hit a buzzer beater. And you have to ask yourself, why is he doing that? He's doing that because they're not playing defense. The same way the Pacers and the Hawks play this season, that's the way now the Bucks will play, especially having Dame. That's how Dame played in Portland. You can't win a championship like that. And Damian Lillard, this is the first year where a superstar, quote unquote, like him, is actually put into the fire of having the responsibility and having the pressure to actually fucking deliver. This is the first time in his career. I mean, just looking at his playoff history, he's pretty much been a first round exit every season, except in the 2019 season, also the 2016 season, where as soon as he met up with the Warriors, or anytime he met up with real competition like the Spurs in 2014, it's pretty much been a 4-1 loss or a sweep. Same thing for the Warriors in 2016. They beat them 4-1. And also in the conference finals in 2019, which is probably the weakest competition Dame had to face in the playoffs. We've seen him eliminate Russell Westbrook, which Donovan Mitchell did the same thing as a rookie in the first round the season prior. But he eliminated Westbrook. He went up against the Nuggets, and it took him to 7. And when they got up against the real competition, the Warriors, and remember, this is with no Kevin Durant, because this is the year he got hurt, tore that Achilles up in the playoffs with a short-handed roster. Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson completely destroyed the Blazers. And if you pay close attention, that series actually exposed on what level Dame really is versus the top-notch competition. Because even going to the season before that, for the 2017-2018 playoffs, Dame as a higher seed got swept by the Pelicans, Anthony Davis and Jrue Holiday, which they completely dominated Dame. And in the last few years, ever since the bubble, we've seen Dame consistently fighting for an 8th seed, or eventually when they created the play-in, he eventually was always fighting to get into that. So yeah, watching Dame Lillard in Portland, you got Dame time, you got a little fun action. There was no seriousness. This team was never expected to do anything. And I think it's been kind of overblown, especially him, quote unquote, making NBA 75, which he's really not. There were people that led their teams to the finals that did not make that list. Didn't make any sense. Guys like Dwight Howard, Walt Clyde Frazier, and the list goes on and on. Dame is not all NBA 75. And with the few examples I gave you in the playoffs, especially going against stiff competition, these series kind of expose Dame of where he's really at. He's not that far off from being a glorified Zach LaVine. Once again, this is when you put things into proper perspective, and I believe Giannis unknowingly has signed himself up to do more work this season. Not only his scoring load has to remain the same, his defensive output has to be almost double to make up for Dame. Once again, it gets exposed in their transition defense. The Bucks just give up way too many points, whether they score a basket or not, in transition. That shows you how much they've fallen from grace from last season and the seasons before. The Bucks, especially with Jrue Holiday, man, it's a complete different identity, different characteristics pop out then. But hey, we'll see if Doc Rivers can actually correct course and put his foot up Dame and Malik Beasley's ass to play some defense. But if the Bucks continue to play Atlanta Hawks / Pacer basketball, they can kiss their championship window goodbye. It is what it is. Until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.